Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. In the words of the greatest American vice president in history, Dan Quayle, welcome to the great state of Chicago. Stacy.
What an awesome state this is. This is Chicago. It is a state of mind.
Yeah, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling the love.
It's a state of bad pizza, by the way.
The pizza here is but the people are nice.
By the way, this show is so hot. The fire department is showing up.
Yeah,
back
the fire
here.
department's right here. If things get too hot, they're just going to hose us down.
So we're going to talk about Chicago. First, I'll give you a little bit of a background about this city, by the way. You know, it was incorporated in 1833, but before then, it was the American Fur Company ran this town. That was Jacob Astor. He basically controlled the entire fur market for the entire U.S. after the War of 1812. So it started out as like a commodities center, and it remained a commodity center when we have in 1864, the CBOT, the Chicago Board of Trade, first started the first standardized exchange traded forward contracts, which were called futures contracts. And then in 1919, the Chicago Butter and Egg Board spun out of that, and it's now the CME Group.
Right. Chicago has been the place where all the trains go to unload their stuff. And around that has grown up the commodity futures market. And then in the 1980s, to give you some more history, a little bit more contemporary history, during the Reagan-Thatcher era, you had deregulation and the beginning of financial futures that have dominated ever since, have dominated the commodity futures. So you have S&P futures, you have bond futures, you have currency futures, and this is what really has built an enormous amount of paper wealth over the past 25 years, are the financial futures contracts.
Well, the city itself has, some of their debt has been downgraded. In particular, the education bonds have been downgraded to junk. Also, they're borrowing right now at an 8%, right? The yield they're paying on their debt is 8%. So they're getting close to Greek-like debt situation. I know you're going to talk to people like Mish Shedlock to find out whether or not Chicago can survive or whether it's going to go the way of Detroit. And I wanted to call your attention also to some other headlines regarding it's been a brutal July, a brutal summer here in Chicago, not just all the deaths and the gun shooting and the gun violence, but we have Illinois' summer manufacturing meltdown. Southside Oreo manufacturer laying off 600. By the way, Southside is straight back that way. So right back there, that's where Obama is also.
Obama hates America. He really does.
Oh my gosh, what's going on here? It's a photo bomber. It's a video. Hey, that guy looked a lot like Andrew Coffey. Where's John Nigerian?
That was funny. Well, okay, this is Obama City, of course, and Obama's building his presidential library just south of us here. But in the South Side, Mondelez International, the maker of Chips Ahoy and Oreo cookies, became the 6th major manufacturer to announce the elimination of hundreds of Illinois manufacturing jobs in the month of July. The Deerfield, Illinois-based company announced impending layoffs of 600 workers on July 29th, along with plans to invest $130 million to install 4 new manufacturing lines in Salinas, Mexico, by mid-2016. The 4 new lines in Mexico will replace 9 manufacturing lines in Chicago's South Side that currently churn out the brand name cookies. So General Mills and Mitsubishi have also been laying off people here in Chicago in July. They announced that, so there was in total 2,800 manufacturing jobs to be lost.
This is a classic portrait of Dorian Gray economy. So the portrait of the real economy is in the attic, rotting to death. Manufacturing jobs are fleeing. But down there in the parlor is the fake economy driven by this paper wealth, driven by financial futures. So the S&P and these other markets are within 2% of all-time highs because they're being manipulated using these financial derivatives that really started in the 1980s. And this is a classic case of, as I mentioned, this Dorian Gray economy, and this is the perfect city to illustrate that, because this was such a hub of manufacturing and of commodities brokering, and now it's from what I understand, Illinois is losing residents to every single state in America. There's a flight out of this state because the economy underneath the facade is actually collapsing in a Greek-like manner.
Well, let's look at it in a few different ways, because I know my family's from Connecticut and they have fled Connecticut and they've gone to North Carolina. A lot of the states like Arizona, Texas, North Carolina, one thing they all have in common is they're warm. They don't have a brutal winter.
What?
So
It's beautiful.
It's more,
All that cold weather stuff was all hype. This is incredible. I was on the beach all weekend.
Exactly. Yes, Illinois is losing population, just like Connecticut is. They are losing 40 jobs a day here, manufacturing losses. But on the other hand, I think of the baby boomers retiring. I know people are saying it's all doom and gloom and it's all the jobs being lost and people are fleeing because of the high taxes. But the fact is also that we have baby boomers retiring and they want to go somewhere warm. I know 15 people personally who've left Connecticut and gone to North Carolina, and the number one reason is the winters. They're sick of the winters.
All right. So you're saying it's more the demographics are driving this exodus out of Illinois more
I'm trying to be positive here.
Okay, well, I'm sure that's a factor.
But you do have a huge problem here because the police pension fund is only 25% funded. The firemen's pension fund right behind us, they could be diving in there looking for some treasure, pearls or something. And
to top off their pension funds.
Top off the pension
They're
fund.
looking for nickels and dimes.
It's only 30% funded, yes. Also, apparently, like the judicial, the judges in this, the municipal area, their pensions are deeply underfunded. So, of course, it was those judges who were asked to vote on this. Chicago wanted to cut the pensions on retirees in order to help fund their underfunded pensions. And the judges ruled that that's unconstitutional. So they weren't able to change it because, of course, the judges would lose out as well.
Well, this is another great showcase for the rot that plagues the U.S. economy. Pensions are underfunded because interest rates are so low. And why are interest rates so low? They need those cheap rates to fuel the financial speculation that drives the high end of the cream of the Chicago elite that live on Paper Mountain, driven by free money from Janet Yellen. Meanwhile, the pensions of cops and firemen and other people who actually do jobs for a living are collapsing around them because interest rates are down near zero.
Well, you have that, yes. And that's also, when you talk about people leaving this state and this city, or as Dan Quayle called Chicago a state, it's unlike, you're going to talk to Mish about this because, in Detroit, what happened, and you saw they've gone bankrupt, they had massive flight of humans, like 50% of the population of the city left. And they also had one industry town, but they also were sold some very dodgy credit default swaps. And that's what we're going to actually talk in a few episodes' time with Janet Tavicoli about. So there were fraudulent derivatives. I don't think they had fraudulent derivatives here because, of course, Chicago is the home of
This is where they sell the fraudulent derivatives.
Yes, and that's what on the commodities trading pit here, there's not actually that much trading that goes on. You have that open outcry and all that shouting and people screaming on the floor of the exchange. That's happening less and less here. And in fact, they say pretty much the only time you do that, now everything is traded on an exchange, an electronic exchange, unless you have a very exotic derivative that you're looking to sell or buy, then you go to the floor and try to find some chump on the floor who's willing to take the other side of this trade.
Well, it's a very romantic city. That song about Chicago where the man dances with his wife. And the sound man told me I'm not allowed to sing on this show. They're very sensitive to my singing. And I was reprimanded earlier for actually attempting to do my song. But I'll just say that there's a song about a man dancing. And I couldn't stop thinking about you. I just couldn't stop. You're my wife and I'm so in love with you. And here we are in Chicago and it just came out and like the love is pouring out of me.
What is going on?
I mean, if you could commodify this, it would make this economy boom.
Okay, well, you mentioned commodities. So let's talk about commodities because this is the home of the commodities trading, right? Well, corn crashes, other commodities brutalized. Since July 14th, corn has dropped 14%, but let's look at this long-term chart going back a few years. And you see corn has been shellacked, it's been destroyed, it's been brutalized, as the headline says. This is part of the global economy is we're seeing the crash of commodities, okay? This is a sign we saw, the last time we saw, it's actually worse than 2008. In 2008, we know what happened then. Baltic Dry Index down hugely. Everything is down, suggesting like a collapse on the magnitude of 2008, but actually worse. So the commodities index is down to where it was in 2001, 2002, during the dot-com crash. So.
Yeah, commodities are crashing.
Yeah.
Corn is down here. There's too much. Again, the deflation that defines this current economic era, driven by low interest rates and driven by low wages coming from China. So you have overconsumption, overproduction, and you have commodities flooding these markets, and there's no accurate price discovery anymore. And as a result, we're entering into this global deflationary Armageddon-like period with nobody willing to step up to the plate and do what's needed to reverse this god-awful trend. And we know what the single greatest thing that could be done to reverse the deflation would be to raise interest rates, get rid of these financial speculators, and resume an economy based on manufacturing and labor and wages. But that's not going to happen because they own government. They own the city government. They own the White House. They own Obama. They own Clinton. Everybody they own except maybe Trump.
Okay, so of course, one of the bright spots in the past 10 years in the U.S. economy where jobs have been added is in the mining sector, is in the fracking sector, is in like places like North Dakota and South Dakota. And one of the rating agencies did look at this collapse of the commodities index, and what they said is states more reliant on mining and farming, for example, 36% of Wyoming's output depends on mining and agriculture, for example, have been disproportionately hit. When we combine the increased unemployment from these industries with renewed layoffs and investment cuts in oil, as we explained here, it doesn't paint a pretty picture for the U.S. recovery. So this is part of the recovery issue. By the way, we're here right on Lake Michigan. You can see
more cops.
That's the Chicago Fire Department.
They're looking for more pension money. They're deep sea diving for old tin cans to get the rebate.
Famously in America, you often have, like in San Francisco, when they're reporting on a shooting and somebody came up and stole all the camera crew.
Yeah, well, the shootings and dead people are in another part of town where they got disenfranchised due to the housing collapse that was engineered.
Okay, but in the last 40 seconds, we're going to say that here's another headline regarding the commodities. Carlyle Fund walloped in commodities rout. So the last headline we had brutalized. This headline we have walloped. These are real. This is a Chicago way. These are Chicago way headlines. They said sell-off has helped drive down holdings in its hedge fund firm's flagship fund from about $2 billion to less than $50 million.
That's right. You come at me with a knife and I come back with a gun. That's the Chicago way. All right, Stacy, we got to go. Thanks so much.
Okay, it's been great in Chicago, the Chicago way.
Oh, stay there. More coming your way.
Over the mic is all feeling go.
Did you know the press is the only industry specifically mentioned in the Constitution?
Stand by.
That's because a free and open press is critical to our democracy.
Track Alpha. Roll Alpha.
In fact, the single biggest threat facing our nation today is the corporate takeover of our government and our press.
Stand by, camera one.
We've been hijacked by a handful of powerful transnational corporations that will profit by destroying what our founding fathers once built up. I'm Tom Hartman, and on this show, we reveal the big picture of what's actually going on in the world. We go beyond identifying the problem.
We try to fix it.
Rational debate and a real discussion of the critical issues facing America.
Stand by on camera, go.
Ready to join the movement? Then welcome to the big picture.
Crosstalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want.
Most people think to stand out in this business, you need to be the first one on top of the story or the person with the loudest voice or the biggest ratings. In truth, to stand out in the news business, you just need to ask the right questions and demand the right answers. Question more.
"40 years later, they are still haunted by the guilt.
All the choices I made, I had real problems accepting that I did this. How can I be?
They come back to the battlefield to say sorry.
Our air war was vicious and brutal and horribly traumatizing to the Vietnamese people.
To remember fallen brothers.
I see you day and night, oh my brother.
And to bury their stories.
We are here together in part to allow the past to come back to us. Stories of so much pain and loss as my brothers carry get buried in our own minds and hearts and souls because the pain is so immense.
Vietnam, the stories that haunt soldiers' hearts.
Hi, welcome back to the Keiser Report. Time now to speak with Mike Shedlock of the Global Economic Analysis.blogspot.com. He's universally known as Mish. Mish, welcome back to the Keiser Report.
Hey, a pleasure to be back again.
And we're finally here in Chicago, and of course, I've always heard about this famous Chicago pizza. We went out last night for some Chicago pizza, and I got to admit, it was crazy. It was because what's wrong with Chicago pizza? I heard it was great, but there's something wrong with it.
This was fantastic. You told me it didn't look like pizza. We had a bet. I said this would be the most unique pizza that you've ever had. I think I won the bet, except you said that it wasn't really pizza.
That's right. It was more like spaghetti meets quiche. But anyway, we're going to talk about handbags at some point, but not. We'll get to that in a moment. Let's talk more Chicago. Hard talk about Chicago. Now, some Chicago debt has been downgraded to junk. So tell us about which debt in particular has been downgraded. How's it going?
The school board. Actually, I believe it's bankrupt. And everyone recognizes that, but no one can say the word. And of course, it's impossible in the state of Illinois because the legislature, the Illinois does not allow municipal bankruptcies. So it's really up to the legislature to do something here. And that's under control of House Speaker Madigan, who really doesn't want to play ball there. Meanwhile, Mayor Rahm Emanuel doesn't want to admit that the school system is broke either.
Now, I've used the analogy of the portrait of Dorian Gray. Like up in the attic, there's the actual economy is falling apart. But here on the ground floor in the salon, because of the financial futures and the money that's being made trading derivatives, it appears as though markets are near all-time high. But underneath all this is really a rotting state, an economy that's really falling apart here in Chicago, right? There's two economies.
Yeah, well, just outside Chicago, there's a place called Illinois. And both Chicago and Illinois are in trouble. Just this past month, 6 manufacturers left Illinois. 2 of them left Chicago. Oreo cookies used to be made here. Mitsubishi left. Manufacturers don't want to expand here because of high taxes, because of property taxes, because of unemployment insurance. Illinois is a disastrous place to work for unemployment insurance compensation.
Okay, so manufacturing is falling apart. And the idea from the elites on Wall Street or in the financial world or in the bankers is that they can always invent something, financially engineer something to save the day. Tell us about capital appreciation bonds.
Capital appreciation bonds, it's not a new thing, but they've been outlawed. Capital appreciation bond says, okay, we're gonna take out this debt and we're gonna use it to fund current projects. But there's no interest, no principal paid on this. All of a sudden, there's a lump sum paid at the end of the year. You know what? where's the money going to come from, Max? Because they can't pay the lump sum payments. They can't make principal and interest payments now. The city of Chicago pension plans are some $20 billion in the hole, in the red. The state of Illinois is hundreds of billions of dollars in the hole. Nuveen did a study that said property taxes would have to go up by 50% just to support these legacy promises that they've made. And said no one wants to look at it and say, you know what, we can't make these promises. And of course,
let's look at some numbers, Mish, okay? The Chicago's taxpayers owe between $20 billion and $35 billion in pension debt, what you're talking about here. That's $60,000 per household. Now, is the mayor seeking to close that funding gap?
He wants the state of Illinois to help close the gap. But the problem is the state of Illinois has a $4 billion hole in its budget for this fiscal year. Ron refused to sign off on that. And of course, it's against the law. It would be actually an illegal budget that they passed. I mean, usually they play these magic games. They borrow money from here or there. They pretend more revenue is coming in. So when they say that it's $4 billion, Max, you can probably rest assured that it's probably more like 8 or 10.
Why not just declare bankruptcy like in Detroit?
Well, we can't. The state does not allow bankruptcy.
But they're heading in that direction anyway, from what you're saying. It's inevitable. They can't stop it.
It is inevitable. Now they're going to come back and say, well, you've got Chicago is unlike Detroit because it can always raise the tax base. Well, you can only raise that so far before people leave. And people are voting with their pocketbook already, Matt. I just looked at a report from the Illinois Policy Institute. Just came out yesterday. Illinois is losing population. Illinois is losing taxpayers to every state in the union, mainly Texas, Indiana, Wisconsin, but also to Alaska, to Washington, D.C., everywhere. People want out of the state. Now, obviously, there's an influx. There's some people coming in, and there's some people moving out. But on average, they're going out, and the people leaving are taking bigger salaries with them than what left.
Right. Now, the biggest pension shortfalls are in the fire and police funds, which they're not even a third funded. Mm-hmm. And across America, there's a lot of social unrest, like in Ferguson, for example, where they begin aggressively shaking down jaywalkers and harassing people on the street for parking violations, etc. Have you seen evidence of that here yet in Illinois or in Chicago, where to make up these shortfalls, the police have been told, just go out there and nickel and dime people to death?
I haven't seen it here, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. I'm in suburbia now, so I used to live in Chicago. Now I live in about an hour north of here. So, but no doubt that's going on. But they're nickeling and diming in other ways too. Emmanuel just passed this tax on downloading transactions, financial data. I forget what they called this tax, but if you're getting anything off of Netflix, or even if you're getting property data, you have a business, a real estate agency, and you're downloading data, you have to pay a tax just for the right to have this data come into Chicago now.
Right, so data has become a commodity. Are there any data futures contracts yet traded on Chicago?
They haven't invented those yet.
They should have a data futures contract.
Yes.
You know, they can make data on the data, trading on the data.
Why not, man?
Yeah, it should be a good idea. Now, Blogspot, you know, your blog is highly read. Wherever I go in the world, people say, yeah, I read Mish and his blog. And I want to digress for a second, just because, you know, why not? Recently on your blog, you were talking about handbags.
Yes, I did.
Okay, now women's handbags. First of all, set this up. What have you noticed about women's handbags?
Well, they're going for as much as hundreds of thousands of dollars, actually. And the bags looked ordinary. But what caught my eye was this report that millennials are renting these handbags. And renting handbags, and for as much as $300 a month, actually, for a handbag that doesn't even look that nice to me. I posted some of these pictures.
But are you in a really position to judge the aesthetics of a handbag, Mike Shedlock?
Well, we all have our taste, Mac.
But these are for women, Mike.
Well, they are for women.
You have to understand that handbags for women are like cars for men. Okay? Women have handbags and shoes. That's their cars. You know, why would a man go out and spend $500,000 for a car? You know, they can't, so they rent the car. So with the women, they're not going to afford a $100,000 handbag, so they rent the $100,000 handbag because that's their mode of transportation. That's their status symbol. That's how they get around and navigate through life.
Well, the idea was that millennials are doing this, and I'm not so sure. I think it's people pretending to be rich. This is what it's all about, Max, is pretense. Someone wants to say, oh, look, I've got this. But I'm looking at these designer handbags, quite frankly, other than the little symbol on there, maybe somebody should just like rent these little symbols to attach to the handbag. Say, oh, this is a genuine. Let's have Misha bags, and also my little Misha bag symbol. And I'll sell these.
They
for
should do a brand extension. Mish handbags.
Yeah, Misha bag.
Yeah, it sounds exotic. It sounds made in Asia. All right, so let's get back to the hard nuts and bolts economy here in Chicago. We mentioned Detroit briefly. Are there any comparisons you can make, let's say, because everyone's kind of familiar with the whole Detroit situation going under? Is there any other ways you can kind of compare the two?
Certainly, Chicago is a much more vibrant city than Detroit, but beneath the surface, there's some real issues, especially in the public school system. It's an absolute disaster in both places. And everyone wants to sweep that under the rug. And at the heart of all of that is the Chicago Board of Education, its crony contacts, its teachers that graduate illiterate students.
Doesn't that point to a greater malaise in the American...
inner cities?
In the American experience as a whole, there seems to be across the country, coast to coast, a kind of breakdown in what we used to call social values in this country. It seems to be not just isolated to city anymore. It seems to be kind of coast to coast. There's a kind of a breakdown, if you will, in the aspirational qualities to the American experience. People are not trying to aspire to be icons in their fields. They just want to consume.
I went to Saxo Bank and I did an economic talk there. And one of the people working for Steen said that he came to the U.S. and did some studies here. And because he was from Denmark, they said, well, they just assumed this guy wouldn't be able to speak English, which tells you. And they put him in this remedial English class. And they said, well, wait a second. He doesn't really belong here. So they moved him up a notch. Finally, they put him in the most advanced class. It took them a little while to figure out, hey, this guy really could speak English. And he got the top grades of anyone in the class. So the European education system, without a doubt, he didn't even get credit, by the way. He wanted to come here for the culture experience. He had to retake all of these classes back in Denmark because they said the U.S. education system was so bad they couldn't give him credit for a year's worth of high school education here.
All right, so let's say we made the kind of comparison between Chicago and Detroit. Let's talk about Chicago versus Greece. Now, in Greece, they're privatizing. There's rampant privatization. That's the answer. They're going to raise taxes. They're going to privatize. It's the neoliberal solution. Here in this city, parking meters were privatized a few years back in what was a sweetheart deal.
Oh, absolutely.
And now, should the government be selling off these income-producing assets? Selling the cow to get the milk, so to speak. Does that make any sense?
Well, you can make a case for it, but not the way that Chicago did it. They sold a revenue stream going out for, decades, and, they used it for a little operational, item. So the money, decades worth, was immediately wasted. And yeah, it was a sweetheart deal.
Right, so you run up these huge debts spuriously or without much justification by engaging in fraudulent bond refinancing sold to you by Wall Street. You find yourself in debt, and to take care of the debt, you take something that actually has hard income, a parking meter, you privatize that, and you use the income to pay off this junk bond that should never have been created to begin with.
Yes, exactly.
Anyway, so now can you stay with us for another segment, Mish?
Sure, I'd love to stay on.
Okay, cool. Well, in the second portion, we'll talk about Puerto Rico and some other stuff. So stay right there, and we'll got to say goodbye for now right here in the Keiser Report. Thanks so much for watching, myself and Stacy Herbert. If you want to reach us on Twitter, it's Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.